Yo guys, what's going on? Robert Warshack here, and we have the best decks since the most recent ballots patch, which was yesterday. We had a lot to shake up. There was a lot of the most powerful cards and things found changed, and there was a decent amount of buffs to underplayed and underperforming cards. However, it seems that the only thing that happened from these buffs and nerfs was the armor. Demon Hunter fundamentally doesn't work anymore, so you cannot play that deck. It does not function the same. However, the other stuff that was nerfed didn't really seem to matter, and then the stuff that was buffed also didn't really seem to matter. So the number one hunter deck right now, there's a bunch of different lists. There's like token oriented ones, there's Zerg oriented ones. This is the more token oriented one with the Amphibious Spirit. Even at 3 mana, the infinite bounces and the fact that pretty much everything has death rattle is really good. Very hard to deal with. There's not a lot of early game AoE that can scale to the level of dealing with this like Defile could back in the day. So the game plan of this hunter deck, like many others, is to put as many small things on the board as possible and then go ahead and give them the death rattle with the Amphibious Spirit. Keep in mind, these are the best performing deck lists as of now. These are not my deck lists. I did not build these decks and I'm not taking credit for them. These are just the best performers that we have right now in the meta. If you haven't seen this hunter deck with all the death rattle synergy and the Elite Froggy Frog, you will soon, because it's a super popular deck, very sticky. And then as you keep killing the death rattle, even if you kill the death rattle minion and the frog is on there, it will jump to the minions that come off the death rattle, which is kind of crazy. So now we are moving on to the Protoss Rogue. This actually wasn't super popular when the expansion first started and has definitely gotten more popular. So at the beginning of the game, it runs the bounce package with the new Harbinger, which is whenever this card enters your hand from the battlefield, summon 2 random 2-cost minions, which is a ton of tempo. And from there, this deck transitions into the Protoss stuff with Hedge Charge. You also run the Drasil, because most of the time you're going to be able to play Artanis, because we have the Chrono Boost, which is generally always going to find it. You're playing this on 8, and then from there you're following it up with a ton of burst Artanis, and then you can give him the immune attack and all that good stuff. So very bursty deck, very tempo. Died a lot to this deck actually the past couple days, and also a lot of the decks started running Grifta again. I really hate this card. I don't like neutral mind control. When it was a thing in Hunter, Discover Hunter, they'd play a bunch of these and deal like 24 damage to your face with 1 mana stuff, and just him coming back in these decks is not a fan. I'm not a fan. And a lot of decks right now are playing that guy. Moving down to the Nebula Shaman with Murmur. This deck Murmur got nerfed to 7, but it doesn't really matter because he does exactly what he still does. It's like the Dungar change when Dungar got moved from whatever 7 to 9, or from 8 to 9. It didn't really make any change. It still was just as good. And then Dungar got moved from 9 to 10. Murmur getting moved from 6 to 7 doesn't really significantly change the deck at all. It still is going to be able to build that absolutely massive board against you very quickly. There are a few Shaman decks that do run the Wish Upon the Star as well as the Nebula. However, again, this is the most popular list people are playing with the Curator and the Ysera, because you're able to get the mana with the Murmur, and if you Shudder Ysera, you can basically just get super duper mana, so your opponent has like 6 or 7 and you're at like 15. And even if you're not like OTKing, if you know, you having 15 mana is way more than enough to be able to kill in the following turn. Also, I know there's probably going to be some questions on why the Malorn is in the deck, even though it's not Imbue Shaman. The effect still triggers, so if you use the Shudder before the Malorn with the Murmur, you're going to be able to get 3 of the Wild God. Even though you may not be playing them that turn, you still being at like over 10 mana and your opponent still being at 6 or 7, and then you playing a Wild God along with playing a bunch of Nebulas is still very insane. So it's generally just the huge board state you make that has elusive and space rocks, and it's impossible to get through. So yeah, Nebula Shaman still very good, still pops off. One of my least favorite decks ever in the game is Zucchini Priest, or Zarimi Priest. It's the Dragon Priest. It has now been reborn into an OTK package. I knew Snorlax was going to be a problem. Whenever there's a card that reduces things down to 1 or 0, generally at some point in their life will become an issue, just like Lady Anacondria did with the nature spells, you know, remember that. Now with the dragons costing 1, you're able to play the Snorlax, you play the Ysera, you play a bunch of dragons like the Briar Spawns, and then you play the Zucchini, and then at the end of the turn these guys attack, and then it's your turn again, and then they attack, and then they attack again. And the tweets that I'm seeing on this deck is it's like anywhere between 60 to 80 damage by turn, anywhere between 7 to 8, 9 the latest. So skipping opponents' turns, still very good. And the early game of this deck is able to hold up with all of the low drops, the 1 through 5s, curve out very nice and easy. And then your end game is that Snorlax with the Briar Spawn and Ysera. So pretty cracked deck. If you like Dragon Priest, you like killing your opponents in one turn, that's the deck for you. But I'm just not a fan of the whole skipping of the turns. Was never a fan of that, and like the old Time Warp Mage as well. Skipping opponents' turns is pretty powerful, especially when it's built into a minion and in Hearthstone. So moving to a newer deck that a lot of people are still getting the hang of, we have the Zarimi Paladin. This is like the Lady Lanessa OTK deck that we had like a couple metas ago, where you were able to play the low cost spells and then they trigger twice. So whether it's like a Grifta spell, manager, you get the coins, you coin, the coin generates more coins, and then you're able to play the Holy Glow Stick, which does 8 instead of 4 because it goes down to 1, because you get to run the Divine Brew, which triggers twice, and generally you put this on the Wind Fury weapon. However, if we look at what the Zarimi gives us, this gives us the Ysera card, which is 2 mana, deal 5 to everything on your opponent's side if it's corrupted. We have the 0 mana, give a minion +5/+5, which can trigger twice. So there's actually quite a bit that you can do with the Zarimi in this deck with the Lanessa, which is basically once that comes out, you're just OTKing somebody. So the whole deck is draw, get coins, get to your combo pieces, pop off. We run 2 of the mauls, so this finds us our Ursul and our Zarimi immediately, and then you're going to be able to get those online and going, because once you get this guy to play the Zarimi as an aura, it's going to trigger each and every turn, filling up your hand and giving you insane OTK potential. So quite a deck, a little bit wacky. It's not as straightforward as the previous Lanessa, which would just kill you from hand. This one actually requires some setup, but the core of the deck is same, where you're hyper drawing, fixating on what you need with the maul, finding the mana to do it once you get to 8, and then from there, opponent is most likely going to be dead unless they have like over 50, 60, 70 life. Moving down to Imbue Hunter, I think this is going to be a super popular deck. Tons of people playing this. It revolves around basically getting King Plush juiced and costing very little mana, and then from there you're able to return him back to your hand with the sing-along buddy. For those of you who are unfamiliar what the imbue mechanic does, it is a 2 mana, discount your beast, a random beast in your hand, and give it X attack based on how many times you've imbued. So if you imbue 4 times, beast in your hand gets -4 mana, which is very powerful, sending King Crush down to like 4, 5, 0 mana, and then just juicing his attack. He has charge, and then he also returns all minions with less attack than this to the owner's decks, which means if your opponent has a bunch of taunts in the way or anything that you don't like, it all gets returned back to their deck. You hit him in the face, you Brewmaster it back, you hero power again, you King Plush again, and then you hit him in the face again. This deck also runs the sing-along buddy, so your hero power triggers twice. Because we're imbuing so much, we run Malorn, of course. Malorn synergizes with the Scout, because the Scout says whenever you discover a card, you get a copy of it, and you're getting a copy of the Wild God. You also get another copy if you do Grifta. So there's just a lot of synergy in this deck, a lot of things that are happening. It gets the combo out very, very quickly, because there's very few beasts in the deck. I know there are some other renditions of this Hunter deck that plays the egg. I prefer the egg one, and it runs like Goldrin, and it runs some other stuff. It's a little bit more control, a little bit slower, but generally how I like to play the game, again, this is the fastest, most meta list that's currently out there, and it's a very Imbue Hunter is very, very strong right now, and it counters a lot of these just slower decks. However, it itself is kind of like a mid-range slower deck, so you have to set up for that big combo. So if you're going against other very aggressive hunters, or that rogue deck that we just covered earlier, you're going to have a pretty hard time with the Imbue Hunter against like the super hyper aggro list, unless you get like a turn 4 or turn 5 crush, just because they're going to be able to aggro you out before you can get your Imbue hero power. It's juicing up. Another really popular list people are playing, a lot of people are doing the Protoss Imbue Mage. However, it seems the Protoss Mage in itself is just doing better, because the Colossus for maximum damage anywhere between like 14 to 20 some plus damage, and then again using that useful Brewmaster to return him back to your hand, and then playing another Colossus multiple times in a row. You also can bob, which I had somebody bob and then draw a minion from their deck, get 2 copies of it, hit Colossus, and then they were able to Brewmaster 2 Colossuses. They got 3 Colossuses, and then the one in their deck, it was so obnoxious. But yeah, very, very, very good deck. Very slow. Keep that in mind. It runs 2 Sleet Skaters. It runs 2 Yours. It's going to get a lot of armor. It's a lot of field clear. You pupil to be able to get more shield batteries, to get more honor, or cannons to get more discounts. So very, it's like old style Freeze Mage, but instead of killing your opponent in 1 turn, you're killing them. I mean, almost. You're probably going to kill them in 1 turn with the Colossus. But if you need more than 1 OTK turn, you just keep playing Colossuses over and over again until your opponent succumbs to darkness. So moving again down to our last deck of the best decks that were shining to us, it's the Location Warlock. So this did get nerfed. Spawning pool went to 2. The Seaside Giant costs 1 less for each time you've used a location in this game instead of the 2 times. So 0 mana Sea Giants happening on turn 2 or 3 aren't as common. Now we get 0 mana Sea Giants on turn 4 or 5, which again is still really good because 0 mana 8/8s are pretty powerful. So if you happen to be playing this Warlock deck, it's still very good, still one of the best decks. Scrapbooking Student, a new inclusion, summon a copy of a friendly location, so being able to get another spawning pool or another Ultralisk Cavern is very, very powerful. Even your Horizon's Edge, if you can save all 5 that durability, because Horizon's Edge into the Scrapbooking Student, both of them do 30 damage in just 2 locations. So you're summoning 8/8, you're doing a ton of damage with Horizon's Edge, and you just have a lot of pressure in this deck. And again, if you do run out of pressure and draw, that's where the deck falters, is once you've exceeded all of your resources, but generally by then your opponent's dead because of just the sheer amount this deck has. So with that, the meta hasn't really changed that much besides the Armored Demon Hunter being what's not good anymore. But somehow, after all those nerfs and the buffs we've received, only 1 deck is no longer popular, while the rest of the meta seemingly has continued to chug on. So curious if you guys had the same experience as what I'm seeing out there on the battlefield. Maybe it just needs more time, but generally the first day is a good indication of what's going on. And yeah, I didn't really see much of a change up again, besides just that 1 Demon Hunter deck, which obviously it's just like fundamentally doesn't work. It's not like you can still play it and it's not as good. It doesn't work. So with that, thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video. Of course, happy whatever the hell day it is.